Why is Strait of Hormuz a choke point? How is Iran going to use it as a leverage and a tool against US, which has retaliated? Can Iran really stop and choke the Strait of Hormuz, which is an important point for maritime trade? What are the major repercussions that the world and Iran will also see if this particular strait is blocked? Whenever Iran has been in any sort of confrontation with the Western bloc, the first and foremost thing it has threatened that it will block the important choke point of Strait of Hormuz. Now we have to understand why is this tactic is used by Iran and what gives it the advantage, especially with reference to this given choke point, that is Strait of Hormuz. In today's session, we will not be just understanding its location but also be looking into the implications if it actually comes to a blockage of this one of the most important choke points of the global oil trade. We will be also talking about if Iran can actually go ahead and block this choke point or not. Hello everyone, welcome to Vajiram and Ravi's Simplified. My name is Shubhangi Singh and today we are getting in depth and simplifying our understanding about Strait of Hormuz. Now beginning with, where exactly is this particular strait, which is one of the most important choke points of the global oil trade, located? Now if we look at this particular strait, it is located between Iran in north and Oman in south, and it is responsible for connecting Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman in the Arabian Sea. Now, the reason it is one of the most important choke points is that the major oil refineries of the Middle Eastern countries are located in this area, and it is via this route and this particular that they are able to export the oil and oil products associated from here on. So, if at all this particular region is blocked, there will be multiple implications which we'll be talking about in the upcoming discussion. As I said, if we talk about this particular Gulf, we have understood the geographical location. Even at its narrowest point, it is 33 kilometer wide and there is only 3 kilometers on each side if we are talking about inbound and outbound shipping lanes. So there are two major lanes, inbound and outbound, and we would have only 3 kilometers of range for both of the sides at the narrowest point. Now, as we can see in this particular range, we have multiple countries which have their outlet to the Persian Gulf, be it Iran, which has the maximum boundary associated with the Persian Gulf. We have Saudi Arabia, we have Kuwait, we have Qatar, we have Bahrain, we have UAE. So multiple countries exist here and their main export is carried out through this particular trade route. However, some countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE do have pipelines which can support them in a situation within the scenario that Strait of Hormuz is blocked. However, for overall scenario, the blockage of Strait of Hormuz will cause a catastrophic economic impact across the globe. Now, all of this began when US struck Iran's 3 nuclear sites, that is Fordo, Natanz and Isfahan, and it was Iran that passed a bill in their parliament to finally block the Strait of Hormuz. But will this strait will be blocked or it will be choked? We will be talking about that. Now, if we look at the importance of this particular corridor, this is very important because, as I said, it is one of the most important oil corridors through which oil passes, and 20% of global oil goes through this particular strait. Apart from that, if we talk about LNG, almost 1/3 of global liquefied natural gas also passes through this particular strait. And OPEC countries, be it Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Iraq, depend on it. Now, if you will notice, the country threatening to block it is also dependent on this particular strait itself. So the major exports that happen from Iran also go through this very strait. So if Iran decides to block this strait, it would be affecting Iran as well. But in what ways, how it will be affected, we will be talking about it. As I said, it is a strategic choke point, and because of this only, you will find that US has military bases in multiple countries in this very region of the Persian Gulf, be it Qatar, be it Saudi Arabia, because it has oil refineries all across which need to be protected. And this militarized region is not just protected by US 5th Fleet, which is stationed in Bahrain, but also UK maritime forces and other regional navies of the countries associated. As you can see the map of the refineries which are present in the Middle East region, and then if you will see the map of the US bases which are present, you will find congruence both of these maps, and that clearly highlights that how this region is being protected, because it is very critical for energy importing nations as well as very critical for the energy and oil prices across the globe. If the oil which is moving through this particular corridor is blocked, that means lesser supply. Lesser supply means increased prices, and even before this route was blocked, the prices have already been surging, especially for Brent crude oil, as you can see in this given chart. Now moving ahead, when we have understood that where is the exact location of this particular strait, how it is one of the most strategic choke points, now let us also understand which are the countries which are using this particular strait and which are the countries which are importing from this particular strait. If you look at this particular given graph here, you will see the volume of crude oil and also condensate which is transported from Strait of Hormuz. First we have by origin. So if you see by origin through Strait of Hormuz, it is Iran, which also has almost somewhere between 15 million barrels per day, which grows through Strait of Hormuz. Apart from that, other Middle Eastern countries, be it Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq, UAE, and the biggest number comes from, you can see, Saudi Arabia, that is almost an average of 6 million barrels per day. Okay, now if we look at this graph, it shows us the volume of crude oil and condensate that is transported through Strait of Hormuz. Now if you see in this particular graph, you will see that on an average of almost 2 to 3 million barrels per day are going out from Iran, and Saudi Arabia is one of the biggest players which is using this strait and sending out crude oil and condensate matter from this particular region. However, if we talk about the receiving parties, you will find that one of the biggest economies, that is China, is the one which receives almost more than 5 million barrels per day. And if this route is to be blocked, then the most affected party would be on both sides, people who are exporting and people who are importing as well. But the only advantage that Saudi Arabia will be able to enjoy, but to a limited extent, that they do have a east-west pipeline and they might be able to bypass the choking of Strait of Hormuz using the pipeline. But there are certain limitations associated with it, so there will be definite impact on the exporting nations as well as importing nations, because the prices will rise and the import bill of these countries will rise as well, and the exporters will be facing higher cost of transportation, higher insurance cost, and both of these would lead to overall price rise, which is basically inflation. Now we have also understood the countries involved would not be just the one who are receiving oil, but also who are sending out, and this will create a ripple effect which will go beyond the Middle East or the countries who are just importing, because the energy prices on the global scale would be rising up. Now let us understand why this all had begun. So this all started when US decided to strike the nuclear facilities in Iran, as I had mentioned, and Iran retaliated because Iran has the capability and the advantage to use this Strait of Hormuz as a diplomatic as well as psychological tool through which they can actually go ahead and threaten the Western bloc and Israel's partner US as well. However, US has been very much clear that if Iran goes ahead and do something like blocking the choke point, the repercussions here would be catastrophic. And US has also asked China to present its case and make sure that Iran, because China, as you have just seen, is one of the biggest importer of Iranian oil, which is given at a discounted price. So US has also involved and asked China to make Iran understand that Strait of Hormuz cannot be blocked. Now, Iran has only as of now passed a bill in the parliament. It is still pending to be passed by their supreme authority which decides on it, that is their Defense Security Council. And Iran, now the next question that comes in, even if Iran actually finalizes on the fact that they will be blocking this route, how will be they able to do it? They would have to do it through using their military capabilities. They can ask their allies to destroy the oil tankers. They would have to use the speedboats which are present. They would have to set up naval mines which they already own, so that any oil tanker that is going around, which it is threatened by crossing that particular passage. And that is why you will also find that that zone is highly militarized for the protection itself. And Iran has the military capability to assure this. It has multiple naval mines, which is EM-52 Chinese mines. It has Russian class submarines, kilo class submarines. It also has midget subs which can facilitate in the blockage, and coastal anti-ship missile batteries, fast patrol boats, and as well as drones. So when Iran decides to do it, it does have the military capability. But what do we think? That US will not retaliate to it. With multiple bases, as you can see, across the Middle Eastern region, you will find that US and its allies will make sure, using their own military capabilities, to free the Strait of Hormuz, even if it is blocked by Iran. Now, another thing that we have to understand, as I said, that US will definitely retaliate, and Iran, even if it does, has the military capabilities that would require time, that would require secrecy and stealth, which is very difficult under this extensively militarized zone and the Western influence. Apart from that, as I said, US and allies would be actively retaliating, and they can deploy rapid mine-sweeping assets which will lead to destruction of the naval mines set up by Iran. And there is a high chance that there can be already a preemptive strike on Iranian naval bases to make sure that they are not able to block the Strait of Hormuz itself. Now, if we talk about the legal constraints, can Iran actually go ahead and do it? So, if we go by UN clauses, then the territorial waters extend up to 12 nautical miles. Now, in those 12 nautical miles, countries can treat it as their domestic territory. Now, Strait of Hormuz falls in the territorial waters of not just Iran, but Oman itself. But another legal factor herein is that it is an international waterway. So, Iran cannot legally block off this particular passage unless they are in a war time. At present, Iran can use this particular term, but Iran would have to remember, even if this blockage is created, it could be only for a temporary period. Now, if any sort of closure does take place, it risks or sort of war escalation further from Iran's side, and it will also risk their own oil exports at JASC. Even though today we are talking about ceasefire, which has been as of now agreed by both of the nations, we are not very sure that how long the ceasefire will exist, and if Iran will actually not go ahead and destroy and block one of the major choke points that we have present in front of us. If it actually comes to it, what are the consequences that we will see, especially for India? So if we talk about India, to an extent, if we were just talking about Iran, our economy seemed on the safer side. But if the total blockage of Strait of Hormuz takes place, we would have to look at a higher increased import bill, because India imports 60% of oil from the Gulf region, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and it all comes via Strait of Hormuz. If any disruption takes place, that means oil prices will rise, simply because there is less supply. So less supply means higher prices, and this will directly lead to increase in prices, be it of goods that you shop in supermarket, be it of the petroleum that you fill it in the car, or if you see, the loans can also gradually get expensive if the government is trying to control the inflation. And this will also lead to trade deficit in the balance of payment. However, as of now, our ministry has released a statement that with reserves and inflation in control, we are ready. But if this war or the particular threat of Strait of Hormuz closing can affect us in coming times. Apart from that, if we look for India, there is another strategic response that we are expecting. Indian Navy has regularly patrolled Gulf of Aden and North Arabian Sea. We have been actively involved in maritime domain awareness, and we are looking for protection of our own waterways. If there is any emergency evacuation required, it has taken place. For example, if we talk about Operation Sindhu taking place, bringing back the Indian nationals from the West Asian region, especially from Iran itself, for their own protection. India is looking towards multiple consequences, but in many terms you will find that India has already prepared a strategic response. And there is another consequence that we are looking forward to, is the Chabahar port, which is present in Iran, which is very important for Afghanistan access that we have, and also international north-south transport corridor, through which we are planning to connect from Russia and Iran and India, through which the trade in terms of oil and gas can be facilitated. So if this particular crisis goes on, this will delay the operation and risk the infrastructure, and also lead to additional costs that we can see for India. Apart from that, India has remained in a situation which is neutral and balancing. The strategic relations that we have maintained it with Israel, we have maintained it with Iran, and we have maintained with another party which says it is not part of the war, but it seems to be very much involved, that is US. So we are strategically involved with all the parties, and we are trying to balance it out. Any misstep, basically, if happens here, we risk diplomatic isolation, and we also risk our strategic over dependence. So when we are talking about Strait of Hormuz, we have to understand we cannot lose on the bigger side that is associated with this particular war when we are looking at consequences of India. But we have to also understand that what are the implications that remain at the global level. So the first implication is definitely we can see an energy security crisis if the Strait of Hormuz is blocked. As simple as that, if the supply is cut off, then the prices will increase. It will also lead to disruption in not just oil, LNG and other oil products, but it will also further exacerbate the situation which is present between Iran, Israel, and it will also affect the countries in the Middle Eastern region which might become party to this war, where direct intervention has already begun. Apart from that, if we look at it, apart from that, there will be an impact on major economies. If we leave the region alone, There were economies which are not part of the war, but they will be still directly impacted. For example, China. As I said, China is the 90% importer of Iranian oil, and it gets it at a discounted price. If this closure actually happens, this is going to be a difficult time because the energy needs of China would be hit, and the Belt and Road Connectivity Initiative is also via Iran, and that will be affected as well. We have discussed the consequences for India in detail already, and we talk about the next party, that is Europe. They are already meeting with the US in the NATO summit that is taking place today. This region is already affected with Russia-Ukraine crisis. It is already paying for the effect in terms of increased prices, in terms of increased military spending. If the closure of Strait of Hormuz takes place, the delayed energy diversification can specially take place from Russian sources. So this is going to be a difficult situation, not just for India, but across the world. There will be a direct disruption of maritime trade. As I said, almost 20% of world's global oil comes from here. Any sort of mine laying or thread can directly increase the insurance premiums. It will increase the shipping cost, and the global supply chains will slow down, which all of this will seemingly increase the price, which is going to hurt the pockets of the common man across the borders living in the world. Now, the last thing that we can understand in terms of the consequences, there will be military consequences as well. If Iran actually goes ahead with this, US naval response is definitely expected. Apart from that, the Arab states which are exporting from this strait, they will also get involved, be it UAE, be it Saudi Arabia, be it Qatar, and this war can become a full-scale regional war where it will not be just limited to Iran and Israel, but US, which has already entered, and other regional parties as well. Now, that was all when we are talking about Strait of Hormuz and the consequences associated with it. Now, let us look at a practice question for you. Consider the following statements regarding countries bordering the Persian Gulf. We have 3 statements in front of you. Then you have the options given here. You can send in your answers in the comment section. That was all from my side. Thank you so much.